Hey guys, you are watching So Totally Relidge, a weekly review of what's going on in religion on the internet. I'm Kristen Howerton. I grew up in an evangelical home and now consider myself a post-evangelical Christian.
I'm Elizabeth Esther from elizabethesther.com. I grew up fundamentalist Christian and now I am Catholic.
So the topic of discussion for this week and the big buzz on the internet amongst a lot of Christian bloggers and writers and thinkers was the Super Bowl. Lots of to do about the Super Bowl, but I'm going to ask you actually because I seem to recall you writing a post about boycotting the Super Bowl.
I did.
So why?
I preempted all the drama
Yes.
just by withdrawing from the room.
Uh-huh.
And it was funny because somebody replied to me, I think it was on Twitter, and was like, "Why are you critiquing the Super Bowl? I thought you boycotted it." And I was like, well, boycotting is a critique. And it's just been enough for me that I was like, I'm just going to avoid it this year. For me, it was just a more powerful statement to make. It was extremely difficult. I felt so lonely that afternoon. I didn't realize how isolating it would feel. Because even if I've had objections in the past, I would still watch the game or have a party or attend a party or something. And there was one point in the afternoon I was like, Matt, can we go on a walk with the dog? I feel so lonely. Like, it was tough.
No, I hear you. I mean, we had just gotten back from travel that morning. We flew in that morning, and I had told Mark on the plane, I'm like, please don't make today about the Super Bowl. We do not have time. We need to unpack and get our kids regulated. Please don't make it about the Super Bowl. And midway through the day, he's like, I can't not. It definitely feels like the Super Bowl is kind of like up with Memorial Day, Labor Day, 4th of July. It is like an American holiday.
Yes.
You do the Super Bowl, and if you don't, it's rather awkward.
Exactly.
But anyway, so in watching the Super Bowl, or I'm sure as you heard, a lot of people had a lot to say, first of all, about the sexy ads. Which, again, not a huge surprise that there was a lot of sexy ads. I feel like this is a loop that gets played kind of every year, is like, as family gathers to watch the Super Bowl, then people are shocked at, these advertising firms using women to sell products in skimpy bathing suits or whatever. But this has been going back to like Cindy Crawford with the Pepsi ad.
I wasn't watching TV back then. So
But it's really nothing new. And actually our mutual friend Nish wrote a post about that, just saying like this ship has sailed. We know that this is not appropriate. So while we did watch snippets of the Super Bowl in the midst of trying to unpack and bathing our kids and all that kind of stuff, my kids were in the room for a few things, and I was definitely aware, had my thumb kind of on the remote to turn it off. But luckily, we didn't have any moments where they saw anything inappropriate. But I did end up watching the GoDaddy ad online that everybody was talking about. Did you see that one?
I didn't, because I had seen it last year, or the GoDaddy ad from last year, and I figured it wasn't going to get any better. And I just decided not to watch it. I just, for me, it's I don't appreciate that kind of advertising. For me, there's a difference. And this is what it gets into, which is, people were like, oh, the GoDaddy ad is awful. And then also like Beyonce is being too sexy, which for me, there's a complete difference between what Beyonce does and what GoDaddy did. GoDaddy is selling a specific product, and they're using a woman and sex and whatever and that to sell the product. Beyonce is embodying her art form and performing her art. She chooses to do that in a very sexy way. It's not the same thing to me, because she if she pulled out a Pepsi can at the end and was like, then I would be like, oh, I see what this was about. But she's talented. I mean, she wouldn't just be up there if she was a beautiful woman. She has a voice. She has an amazing cardio ability to dance and sing at the same time.
She's a great dancer.
So for me, there's a difference there. Does that make sense? Or
I definitely found the GoDaddy ad offensive, especially because I felt like just I didn't find actually the imagery of the two of them kissing all that awful. I thought it was kind of gross, but just more of the idea behind it that, it's the guy that needs a website and the return is a hot girl, or just this total commodification of women. So I didn't love that. Although I would disagree with you in that I think Beyonce's selling something too.
Yes.
I think she's selling her music, her brand, and I definitely think she is also using Sexuality to sell it.
Yes.
I know people will disagree with me on this, but I actually don't think Beyonce has the best voice. I think she has a mediocre voice.
Really?
Yeah.
I think she's
really hot and a really good dancer and really pretty. And then that kind of pushes her above. But I think I don't know, when you contrast like Jennifer Hudson singing with Beyonce, she sang earlier in the evening, or even Alicia Keys. I don't know.
Yeah.
But that's obviously totally debatable. But a lot of people...
She's selling Beyonce.
She's selling
and Beyonce is the full package.
Yeah.
Right? Do you think there's a problem with a woman... for me, okay, and I'm totally willing to be wrong on this, and I'm just curious. Is it objectifying for a woman to sell her, not sell herself, but to use all that she is to promote her own brand, her own music, her own art? If we are saying that it's offensive for a woman to use her beauty, is that offensive for a woman to use her beauty and to be unashamed of her sexuality? Does that cross the line?
I think that's a great question, and I feel like that's the question that I've been seeing bandying around, is like, what is okay? And I saw a lot of people describing her performance as owning her sexuality. And so, it's kind of affirming because she's owning her sexuality. Where I get a little leery of, in terms of using those words for what she was doing, is what she was doing looked an awful lot like any other objectification of women I've seen.
Okay.
Her dancing was awesome, the choreography was great, but there was still the ass slaps. There was still the, like, I'm going to put my finger in my mouth.
There was that one point, and when
draw it down.
Yes, because I did watch the halftime show.
Okay.
And when she did that, like the lick and the I literally said out loud, okay, going too far.
Well, that's for men. Like, there is one reason to do that, to titillate men. That is not for the ladies. That was not for herself. That was not a little confidence move. That was like, hey guys, want me.
Yes.
Let me be super sexual so that you want me. So I don't believe that in her performance we can say that, what she's doing is owning sexuality, whereas, a Carl's Jr. ad with a girl in a bathing suit
eating a hamburger
is objectifying. To me, we can't say that we're going to beat the objectification of women by things that look really, really similar to the objectification of women.
That's fair.
I just don't know if we're going to dismantle being treated like sexual objects by making ourselves look like sexual objects. Like, that's not owning it. And then to me, owning your sexuality doesn't happen on a stage or in a performance. Like, owning your sexuality means that you feel sexy even if you don't look like Beyonce. Owning your sexuality means that you are comfortable to be free in the bedroom with your husband. Owning your sexuality means that you feel like you can initiate and say what you like in sex. Like, to me, that's owning sexuality, not getting up on stage and being really sexual. So I feel like if we are lauding what she's doing as owning your sexuality, then what does that mean for me or for you? If we say, well, I want to own my sexuality, what, we have to go take a pole dancing class?
Right.
I don't know. Like, I don't buy it. I don't buy that this is owning her sexuality. I think, again, she is in a highly commercialized environment, and she is selling her albums with what people know sells best, and that is sex. And I don't think it's really helping anybody that she's perpetuating that.
Yeah. That makes sense to me. I think maybe where the rub is for me and what makes it difficult for me is, like, when I see men who are super gung-ho about the Super Bowl and have nothing to say about the despicable ads. Yeah. But as soon as Beyonce gets on stage, it's all, oh my gosh, what a slut. Right? It's that kind of language. That, I think, is what bothered me. And that's what made me feel like, hey, what she's doing is different. Or you're being inconsistent. If you're going to call her out and say that what she's doing is objectifying, and herself or whatever, how come you're not saying anything about the ads? Why aren't you more outraged about that?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think some people were outraged by both. And I think it's, it's legitimate for a man to say, wow, I felt like that performance was an effort to get me aroused.
Yes.
I feel like that's legitimate, and I've seen a lot of bashing of any man who says something even like that. It's like, oh, you're just threatened by a woman, or, you can't handle a woman being in power. But I don't know. I think it's legit for a man to say, and especially a feminist man to say, I don't know what that was about. That kind of seemed like
she was trying to...
Yeah. To titillate, I mean...
Yeah. Yeah, I think for me, you know what, and I'm guilty of that. I'm guilty of saying, like, this is, okay, and this is maybe, it's hard for me sometimes because I have felt like, especially in Christian circles, women are so often told, like, this is the only appropriate way to express your sexuality. Yes. And it's, if you actually have a God-given talent, like you can write or you're a musician or you're whatever, you have to stay within these certain bounds in terms of, like ugly it down a little bit.
Yes.
So you make us feel comfortable.
Yeah.
And sometimes I feel like I don't even know, like I used to be accused, like, oh, you're being flirtatious. I was just sitting here chewing food and you're saying I'm chewing it sexually. Yes. Do you know what I mean?
I do.
So maybe that's why I react a little bit and like feel like leave her alone.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I see your point too. I just get a little nervous when I feel like we're policing.
I hear you. I totally hear that. And I don't know if there's a middle ground here. I mean, I want to say that I don't feel like it was all that offensive, actually. I wasn't like clutching my pearls. I'm not calling for a boycott of the Super Bowl. I think I'm just reacting to everybody who said, there's this pendulum swing because you had people on Facebook saying, oh my gosh, Beyonce, she's from Satan. Yeah. And then the pendulum swung the other direction of like, no, she's a feminist, empowering, blah,
right.
blah, blah, blah.
Somebody was saying it's like she's prophesying. I'm like, I don't know that I would go that far.
Right.
It's
And to me, it's like, well, I don't know if it's really either. I mean, it was a pretty typical performance of a pop star. Yeah. That's what we were given. It was very sexy. Okay, I don't need to like boycott the Super Bowl, but at the same time, I'm not going to call that some like, grand showcase of feminist power. No.
You're right. I think the part where people felt it was feminist power also, though, was that there were no men on stage.
Well, I heard that a lot too, but I just don't buy that. I don't buy that if there's no men involved, but we continue again to behave in the same way that we've been taught by our culture that women need to act, but we say, well, there was no men, and so, but we're still literally reenacting a man's fantasies. Mm-hmm. Then that doesn't I don't buy it.
I thought this was an interesting point in that, which is it was this whole like Sex in the City sort of thing where like women can go out and act like a man and sleep with as many many partners, right? And like that's empowering. That was supposed to be empowering. When really, is that empowering for a woman to act like a promiscuous man? Yeah. Does that?
Yeah, no, and I agree, and I don't understand also why there's this double standard of women being overtly sexual as being empowering when we would never expect that of a man. We would never see a guy get up gyrating and wearing very little and all of us go, oh, he's empowering himself. Mm-hmm. We wouldn't.
We would just say that's his performance.
Well, and we would probably, no one would accept it. Honestly, I mean, it just wouldn't happen. A man would never get up in an outfit like that. It would
not an outfit like that, but like remember when was it Mick Jagger like a few years ago?
That's true.
I mean, he was up there like full on gyrating, and he's an old guy.
No, I mean that is very true. But I don't think we would say, well, he's in touch with his masculine power for that. I think we would just say,
but we would say that was an awesome performance. Like nobody is out there going, that was so sinful.
True.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. No. Yeah, that does make sense. Although I don't know. I think probably some church ladies were clutching their pearls on that one too. Yeah. But yeah, I hear what you're saying. It is a double standard. But it's been so interesting to read everybody's like really strong reactions to this kind of back and forth. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, I still am just troubled by this idea that female power and sexuality are so closely linked that a woman using her sexuality is seen as power as opposed to a woman using, I don't know, her intellect, talent. To me, people who are saying that this looks like power, it's like, okay, then is the Miss America pageant really a pageant about power? Mm-hmm.
I think sexuality is power. It's a kind of power.
It is. It is one of many things in our toolbox. And I don't like that it's often lauded as the only thing in our toolbox. And obviously Beyonce has talent. She's got all those other things, but I don't know. I mean, no one was talking about how good her singing was.
I thought, well, maybe I'm biased because I like her and I think she has a fabulous voice, and I sort of swoon a little when I hear her. So for me, I was like, oh, it's just amazing.
I mean, I have to say, Also, I did not dislike the performance. Yeah. I thought she did great. She's such a good dancer. I actually liked the choreography beyond, some of the little added
things.
Clear, look at my ass kind of stuff. I will say I did turn it off though.
Yeah.
And I turned it off at the point where she licked her finger, just kind of like, look at me.
Yeah.
Acting like.
Well, for me, that part, it's just unnecessary.
But I didn't turn it off because I was so offended. I turned it off, and I didn't turn it off because my sons were standing there with their jaws open. I turned it off because of my daughters.
Yeah. Interesting.
And not because I think, oh my gosh, heaven forbid my husband see a sexy girl. That was not even, had the kids not been here, we would have just sat there and watched it, whatever. Yeah. And I'm sure Mark would have been, happy to continue watching. But my girls are watching it, and they love to sing. They love to dance. They love Beyonce, and they're watching, and I'm just thinking, well, first of all, I don't want this dance reenacted on the playground at school.
Right.
But also I don't want them to think that that's how a performer has to behave.
In order to be successful.
Totally. And it really actually makes me sad that this is the direction that most female performers have to take. You see
you have to take your clothes off.
You see Miley Cyrus. As soon as they reach a certain age, it's like, oh, now
you have to be sexy.
Is the time. Now I'm going to do a pole dance on stage. Or now, I took India to a Demi Lovato concert. It was really sexual. So it bums me out that women feel like they have to behave in this way in order to succeed in this industry.
Yeah.
And so again, I'm just not going to laud what Beyonce did as some great act of power when I think she's just playing into a misogynistic music industry.
Well, and I agree that in order for it to be truly empowering for all women, it needs to be for all women, attractive and unattractive alike.
Right.
Okay, so if what we're saying is that only attractive women are allowed, but the rest of you don't get to be empowered because you're not attractive enough,
right? That
is a form of discrimination.
I feel that way too, which is again why I feel like if we're saying that this is the picture of owning your sexuality, then we're all screwed.
Can we say it's one picture?
I wouldn't. I really wouldn't because again, I don't know. I think that Beyonce is not reacting to her instincts. I think she's reacting to a sexualized culture and what she knows she needs to do to sell herself. And I would hesitate to ever call a commercial performance in the middle of a man-dominated sport a place where a woman can own her sexuality.
True, because context matters.
Yeah.
It really does.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. That's
Again, I'm not a huge Beyonce fan. I mean, the woman married a rap star who, until the birth of his daughter, referred to women as bitches.
And hoes.
And great that he had a turnaround when he had, when he had his daughter. But hello, she was married to him while he was still behaving that way. So I do, again, have a hard time seeing Beyonce as a pillar of female strength when she's putting up with that.
And I will say there is a pressure because my daughter dances. And you can see that, she's ballet primarily, but she takes lyrical classes. And the whole way that jazz and all of that has gone is there's a huge, booty shaking, little girls doing the facials, like that kind of stuff at 6, 7, 8 years old.
Yeah. And the grinding.
And the grinding.
Totally.
And you go to these competitions and you see, I'm looking around and there's dads and older men and you're just like, oh my gosh, why is my daughter dancing like? So I agree that, and especially if someone of Beyonce's influence needs to understand there are young women, young girls even watching, and I hear your point. I think I just still feel uncomfortable when we try to police and control it.
I hear you. Totally hear you on that. Lots of cognitive dissonance on this one. Well, I'd be curious to hear what you guys think. What was your reaction to Beyonce's performance? Did you find it offensive? Did you find it, that you felt kind of neutral? Did you think that this was, a step towards female empowerment or that it was a display of power? What's your take?